right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to come out here on what turned out to be a beautiful spring day. I'm going to take a moment to introduce myself. I'm going to facilitate tonight's conversation. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Julia Salesi. I'm a Collingswood resident and parent to a sixth grader at the middle school and a fourth grader at Garfield. By day, I am the Chief Strategy Officer at a nonprofit Philadelphia youth basketball. I started my career as a high school science teacher and then spent time as a teacher coach before moving more into the nonprofit space. I have extensive facilitation experience. I'm certified in the sanctuary model, which is a trauma-informed organizational framework, and I volunteered my time to facilitate these Q&A sessions so that folks can focus on answering questions. I'm going to do a couple things before we formally get underway. I'm going to frame the purpose of our time here together and share some details on the format. So the purpose of our time here together tonight is to both allow the board to respond to submitted FAQs and answer live questions. The goal of the evening is really to support the community's understanding of the referendum that was proposed at the special board meeting presentation on March 26th. I want to note that not every question in the FAQ or that's been asked so far will be directly answered. The board will be answering the most comprehensive themes to provide as much clarity as possible before turning it over to all of you here tonight. We are also both live streaming and recording tonight's conversation. To achieve that purpose, the board will first share answers that they received before tonight's session. So thank you to everyone that submitted questions. Following their answers, we'll open the evening to everyone in the audience. To maximize our time, we're going to ask folks to have a question prepared. Unlike public comment, we're going to ask that folks reserve your personal thoughts or share when an answer can be provided. You will then have an opportunity to ask a clarifying question should you have one. Clarifying questions ask the presenter kind of who, what, where, and when, not why questions that can be answered quickly and succinctly. So how much time does this portion of the project take? Where can I find the resource you just referred to? Was this element considered? Kind of clarifying questions. Our goal is to hear as many voices as possible. So we're going to ask folks to limit themselves to one question before everyone who would like to ask one has had the opportunity to do so. And just need to share your name with us when you come up. Don't need addresses as this is an informal proceeding. Finally, before we start, I would like to introduce some community agreements for the evening. When we come together here as a town, we have a real opportunity to engage in productive discourse with one another. As a former teacher and as a current leader who works on behalf of young people every day, we can really serve as a model of what positive civic engagement looks like. And I offer the following agreements, which I will share on a slide, as a foundation for tonight's conversation. So the first community agreement I would offer here tonight is respect. So we understand these topics are deeply personal and important to individuals and our community, and we seek to learn from one another and treat each other with respect and civility. The second I would offer tonight is empathy. We recognize that this proposal contains changes that elicit a heightened emotional response, and we honor that emotion. Third, I'd like to offer up curiosity. We engage as learners and recognize the time and thought that went into this proposal while acknowledging the perspectives that it may be missing. We ask questions to seek understanding. And finally, evolution. Our goal tonight is to answer questions from those submitted and those here tonight. 90 minutes will likely not suffice for every question to answer, so please know that this process is evolutionary and that there is another session coming out which will outline the next steps of when we close up the evening. Again, I ask that you listen, process, answer, and respond with the sentiment of the spirit of those community agreements. You will hear me using the language throughout the evening. I also have the
right here when kids were speaking about walking out to the town hall about a year ago, a couple weeks before today. And it was emotionally charged. They were very expressive about not being heard, about not being seen. Also, in that there was a lot of uncomfortableness, showed up to serve kids without due process. And the whole situation made it uncomfortable. Kids were hurting, adults were being accused, and it was story after story. And I remember thinking, and I got up and said it at the time, and this is when we started the DEI committee, was about that sometimes it's most of the time it's the system and it's not the people. And a little bit more to what Julia spoke about, I just wanted to touch and say that whatever happened in the high school, the kids, black and white, need us. Regardless of how it was spoke, regardless of what anybody thinks, right or wrong, about the actions, they're screaming for help in their own way. And it's upsetting and disappointed, not in anybody, that a year ago we were having the same discussion with the same things of this discussion and how we act as professionals and adults when we disagree sometimes I feel like creates the space for kids to feel like it's okay to not be nice to each other. So I just wanted to start with saying myself and speaking for myself, not for the board, not for this ad hoc committee. And still optimistic. I'm optimistic that people showed up to ask questions, that people are in support of this, and that some people aren't in support of this, and that they're bringing dialogue and conversation as to why they're not. Because I'd like to think that we are all here to make this school district better. And I feel like from a board and administration standpoint that they're doing what they feel is what's best for this district, and from a teacher standpoint and being married to an educator of 22 years, and the teachers that my kids have experienced are as hardworking and dedicated to kids that are not theirs as any teachers in any district. And as a parent and friends with tons of parents in this town, I feel like parents are doing everything that they can. And yet we have data and evidence of these incidences and our academic achievement that shows that our results is not meeting our efforts. And I personally believe that that has more to do with structure than people. Now, in that element, and we're talking about equity and inequities, and the concern, because the number one question that we got was about the inequity of transportation for these kids and what this change means for that. And one of the things that we've talked about as a group that started, and to be clear, is that DEI did not drive this referendum. No one got up and said, let's rearrange the schools for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Personally, I'd be all for it, regardless of whether Good Shepherd was an option or not. But I think that we just need to clear some overarching themes of what's happening is that the option of Good Shepherd became available, and we talked about the benefits of it, not that DEI and academic, and we need to make these changes. So when we talk about the benefits from the equity and the inclusion, we operated from a snapshot of where we are and what this means in that. So I say that because I think there's concerns that or questions that we received that people move forward stating that about how is this equitable or how this is inclusion and how did you come to that. And this process started 3 years ago with the ability to purchase Good Shepherd. So I'm going to move on to the questions. I'm sorry for the side, but I felt like it needed to be said. Um, the transportation and the inequity of the transportation and what does that mean for the town. And as inequitable as that is, we are trying to weigh the discomfort that comes from the traffic and the concerns, the additional walking to the needs that all of our kids have. So there is no being dismissive of the distance and what this creates. There is no dismissiveness of what it means for drop-offs. But we're trying to weigh that to serving kids' needs academically and in inclusion. And if anyone has had the opportunity to read our scores and see where we are, everyone is just really trying to take this option and make the best decision. So it's not, no one is stating that the travel and the distance isn't inequitable, because that would not be the truth. But what we're saying is we're trying to weigh the things that become inequitable to the needs that we have. And part of what those needs are, and when we're weighing that, is looking at where our kids are now. From K to 8th to high school, with the understanding that it starts in the beginning. And this is where that pre-K and K is in the beginning, and high school is where we end. And what our kids are, where our kids are, is a result in real data as to what we're doing is working and what we're doing is not working. So it's taking that data, and we're not going to go through all the test scores and reports, but if it has been asked, we will be reaching out with some of the information that we did review and how we got to this point. But when we're talking about equity, we're trying to weigh the aspect that in 8th grade, 16% of our white kids are proficient in math. So when educators see those numbers and an opportunity comes up, the question is not about how we're hurting people or how we're taking something away, even though that is a real emotion and a real feeling. The question is, what can we do if everybody is doing the best that they can? In 4th grade, African American kids have a 0 proficiency in reading across the district. So it's these things when we're talking about equity that, yes, transportation matters, that should not be dismissed or minimized. Walks, traffic, safety of parents and kids and special education kids getting off bus matter. And we're trying to weigh those needs with the needs of where we are as a district academically. And some other questions just moving forward is, why would this not be done on election day? The thought process in the planning, along with the architect and submissions, this is the biggest referendum that this school referendum that this town would have done in over 20 years. It then deserves to be the primary focus on election day. As we all know, we have a presidential election and regular elections. This is not some cause to mistreat or low turnout. This is important. And I don't know any other way outside of all of our frustrations with turnout that if you can't turn out and vote on one way of how you feel about this, then it's just not that important to you. There are some concerns about, and a question that we received about, what about the kids, if this were to pass, what about the kids over the next 3 years who are in those schools? And teachers and concerns about maintenance, and I can assure you in these conversations that we will continue serving the kids as we do right now till this day, whether this referendum passes or not, every single day. As far as inclusion, um, I'm just going to kind of go back to the numbers that were presented before. And one of the things that we talked about is that we are a 41% inclusive district. And the only thing, and we did not receive a lot of questions on that, but the only thing I would say is if there was any other subsection in a school district of kids that were excluded in a 66% at a 60% rate or 59% rate, we would all be marching on the schools. We are the worst in the state, in one of the worst states in the country. And our structure as it is today does not allow for that to be more inclusive. If it did, I believe because of this superintendent and the previous superintendents and the previous boards and the previous principals, if this structure allowed for us to be more inclusive, then we would be more inclusive. As far as diversity, I'm just going to read from the American Federation of Teachers, and this will kind of be the last statement for me before I pass it on along to Fred, is racial and social economic school integration has proven to be one of the most powerful strategies known to educators to improve the lives of students and reduce national division. Students who attend integrated schools are more likely to seek out integrated settings later in life. Young children experiences with intergroup contact have long-term consequences. Research shows that plentiful, positive, early cross-group interactions result in increased comfort living and working in diverse environments as adults. Particularly for young people, the ability to form cross-cultural relationships in school settings can be extremely powerful. This report goes a lot further. Again, if anyone is interested in it, after this is over, please reach out to me. But there is plenty of reports from the American Federation of Teachers, the NIH, that talks about how more diverse kids serve all students. This is most of the questions that we have received in regards to the one last is that there was a question about IEPs and special education, and is the ultimate goal of this plan to make sure schools. Right now, I'm going to pass it on to Fred.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you again for being here. So first, following Julia, my name is Fred McDowell. I'm the proud superintendent of Collingswood Public Schools. But more importantly, I'm a Garfield parent of a first grader and a soon-to-be college. And so what I would say is that as a community, we all own the future. And so there's a role for each of us to play in how we are supporting our young people. And so the question that I'm going to try to reflect and answer to the best of my ability is how did we get here? And so we talked about some of the systems and processes and actions, but we didn't talk about the goal. And so I want to make sure that we are all crystal clear in what our initial goal was when we started this process after we made the announcement in September of 2022 of our intent to come back to you as a community with a cohesive ask. And so our goal ultimately is to increase student access to educational space in Collingswood. And so that's the overarching guiding principle for all of the decisions that we have made leading up to this point. And so it is pretty common knowledge that we have been over capacity at the elementary level for many, many years. But it is also our collective responsibility to ensure that all students within our community have what they need to be successful. And as you heard from Bruce, systems and structures that serve as barriers to our young people, it is incumbent that we remove said barriers. And so the initial question that we posed to the architects and the engineers, it was not skewed, it was not a biased question, it was one simple question. What can we do based on the facilities that we have and the resources at our disposal to increase educational space in Collingswood? And so our professionals, they analyzed every facility in the inventory of the school district, in addition to Good Shepherd, which has been the crux of some of our decisions. And then they came back to us with what could and could not be done in each and every building. And so we explored all of our options, but to be extremely direct and transparent, the reason why that we have options available is due to the unfortunate closing of the Good Shepherd during the pandemic, and that helped to propel the conversation forward. Because without Good Shepherd, this conversation would be a non-starter. And so when we look at how to move forward, or how to ask questions, or how to even think about some of these things, I think it's also important for us to acknowledge that in a successful outcome, we are planning for September of 2027. And so let me say that again. We are planning for a successful outcome to begin September of 2027. And so discussing hypotheticals, those are not discussions, would not start until after we have a positive response with the September vote. That we share that, but also to let you know that these concepts are not being lost, they're not being ignored, they are on the radar. We just simply don't have all of the information to be able to provide a cohesive answer about things like class size per grade. Enrollment is determined 6 to 9 months prior to the beginning of a school year. We would not have projected enrollment numbers to give you a concrete answer until 2026. In addition to traffic studies and other studies that have emerged based on some of the questions within the FAQs. And so it's important to also acknowledge the difference between an annual school budget, which is focused on daily operations, and a referendum, which is solely for construction projects. Within our annual budget, we don't operate in hypotheticals, we operate in concrete. And so traffic studies, demographic studies, additional what-if scenarios, additional design options and opportunities, those are things that are not able to be funded within a daily operational budget. And so those are soft costs that are often associated once a referendum has been approved, and there is funding connected or attached with the referendum to be able to pay for those things. And so we do believe that things like traffic studies and demographic studies are important. We also believe that catchment analysis to make sure that there is minimal disruptive impact on young people is important. However, that work would not take place until after we have an affirmative response in September of this year. And so we want to make sure that we are being mindful of all of the questions for all of the students that we support. And so in our community, we're supporting roughly 2,300 students and their families. But more importantly, we have 14,000 residents within our community that all have a vested interest in this very important topic. And so we are trying to balance all of those voices. Every voice is important. However, not every voice or every question is actionable at this particular moment. That does not mean that actions will not be taken in the future. It just means, as of today, we are operating based on information that we have with estimates and projections of what conversations might look like in the near future.
Thank you, Dr. McDowell. My name is Reagan Caden. I'm the president of the board, and thank you all for coming out tonight once again to talk about this very important topic. What I am going to address tonight are some of the questions or themes of questions that came through that asked both what the role of the board is and was in formulating this plan, as well as how things align to bigger picture goals for the district. So first, starting with the role of the board, when any of these sorts of things start, it generally starts with an ad hoc committee of some kind. So a small group of the board gets together to discuss a need. In this case, the need, as Dr. McDowell just pointed out, had to do with facilities and buildings, particularly, in fact, the ad hoc committee had originally started knowing that we had two different types of needs, which are addressed in this proposal. One of the needs was the facilities for elementary school students. The other need was the recreation and athletic facilities behind the high school that are not what we would want for our children. So the committee was tasked a couple of years ago with talking about both of those things. As Dr. McDowell said, Good Shepherd stopped being a school. We learned that it was available and felt that it was important for us to investigate and jump on that potential opportunity because it is literally the only school building left in our town that we don't own. And so what came from that, any of the discussion about potential grade movement stemmed from, okay, we have this building that the professionals that work for us, the architects, the engineers say is the bones of it are in great shape. It's bigger than any school building we have. It could give our students the opportunity to have a separate gym and cafeteria and not have to share the same space. How revolutionary for Collingswood. And we felt that it would, we had to try to figure this out, right? So that is where we get to when we come to the lease situation that we are currently in with Good Shepherd. We feel we got a pretty good deal on the sale price that we have locked in, and then it was up to us to try to figure out how to get this building. And Matt and Bob are going to talk more specifically about how that process works, but what I can say for the board is once we learned what needed to happen, the steps that needed to happen in order to acquire Good Shepherd, that's where we came in to start saying, okay, well, what opportunities are there now that we know in order to, like I said, they're going to get more specific with this, but in order to acquire Good Shepherd, we would need to decommission 2 schools to be able to show the need for number of seats. So if we had to do that, how are we going to best serve students, knowing that to be the case? And that is where we took, we went back to what our long-term goals have always been, upgrading facilities. This would do that for potential 4th and 5th grade students, and then asking Garrison to go through and tell us, well, how can we update or add on to other buildings to actually be able to serve all of our students more. Again, they will talk more about why the choices were made about which buildings can be added on to that have to do with technical reasons, not choice on our part that has anything to do with feeling one school is better than the other. Anyone in this room that knows me would not say that that was how I would make that decision whatsoever, but it came down to the logistics of the buildings. So once we got there, then we went back to things that we've been talking about for years now, and I'm looking around the room, and I know some of you were in the equity committee back in 2017, 2018, discussing things like the inequities in school performance of our 5 elementary schools. What can we do to address that? How can we do better by our students than we have been doing? And so we've tried to figure out ways, as Bruce was trying to point out, that we think maybe this, if we change the structure of the system a bit, we might be able to serve our students better. That is ultimately up for all of you to decide, but the role of the board is to try to come up with the best, most feasible, most cost-effective plan that we can. And that's what we believe we've come with, and then our role from now on is not to convince you of anything. In fact, we are not allowed to do that. It is to simply give you our why, how we got to this place, and then what the plan entails. And then your role is to do exactly what you've been doing and will be doing today, which is ask us more questions about it, get a better understanding of things, come visit the fields if you haven't already to see the condition that they're in now and why it might be worth giving them an upgrade, look more into how these buildings are going to be designed that we think might benefit students, and then make your decision from there. But we are here to provide you with that sort of information, and that's what we hope that we are doing today and will continue to be doing after today, until the vote and then even after that. So I was trying to be brief. I'm not sure how brief I actually was. I'm going to pass it over to Kate now. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I wasn't able to be at the March 26th meeting, so I'm very happy to be here tonight. So a lot of you asked questions regarding academics and academic impacts, so I'm going to be addressing some of those. I think we've gotten a lot of good rationale thus far around how decisions around consolidation of schools came about. And I think, once these options sort of made themselves available, we started thinking about the lots of potential benefits there are to some of the consolidation efforts that we're going to be making. And so, despite the potential loss of two buildings, there are a lot of benefits that are linked to some of the consolidation efforts. It helps us ensure that students at each grade level are receiving the same educational opportunities and experiences as their peers across the district. There can be better alignment in assessments, project-based learning, age and developmentally appropriate experiences. All of that can be ensured a little bit more in a consolidated system. We already heard a lot about opportunities for more inclusion. Additional elementary school classrooms means that students are their peers. It would mean that they push in models that would enable things like co-teaching, right, which we know is a gold standard of inclusion. It would also make more space for things like specialized services, things like serving students across different learning formats. There would be more space to do that. There are also, in addition to some of these academic and learning benefits, there are some social emotional benefits to some elements of this plan. There are more opportunities for developmentally appropriate socialization. It can facilitate the formation of friendships, relationships, peer support networks that are not just in one community but across the town. And that is something I feel like I have heard a lot, right? I wish that there were space to do that more. Have to follow one cohort, right? Other than Tatum, they don't have to follow one cohort their entire elementary school career, right? That means that there's a little more room to make space, to remix kids if necessary. Lots of opportunities to do that and maybe minimize times when kids are across one cohort their whole career. There's also the ability to prepare 4th and 5th graders more for middle school, which prepares them more for what is coming when they hit 6th grade. We also see some possibilities for our teachers in this plan. I'm looking at a bunch of them right here. Thank you for being here. A lot of you asked about this in the FAQ, so I wanted to address it. We firmly believe that teachers are most effective when they are treated as professionals and respected in their craft. And we think space is part of how we can do that. So consolidated schools could for co-planning, for professional development that is catered to different ways for some of those meetings we know have to occur. And there are opportunities for leadership and specialization for teachers. The plan creates particularly opportunities for teachers of 4th and 5th grade who might be able to specialize in certain content areas or subject areas. Because this plan might enable 4th and 5th graders to travel, it means that teachers could also be moving toward a specialization model where they wouldn't have the pressure to teach multiple subjects. They can fine-tune their craft in certain subject areas. Really quickly, there were also questions around pre-K and academics with pre-K. Our goal is always to get to the 100% of our pre-K universe. This plan helps us get there. We don't know what the pre-K universe looks like in September 2027, so we can't know exactly, but the flexibility about what happens if the referendum doesn't pass, what happens to certain students. And the truth is that if we don't purchase the Good Shepherd building, there may be serious academic and other impacts on students. As Reagan just said, yes, it's a missed opportunity. It also mean that if, or inevitably when, very old buildings have things happen, there potentially would be nowhere for students to go if there would need to be a renovation or something that would take them out of the school. There's no state aid for emergency construction. There's no state aid in emergency situations for renovations, right? So we would really, without that, without a bond, we would have to rely on our capital funds. And until those are there, it would mean that students might be left in difficult situations. And so, for example, we wouldn't ever want to consider doing something like 2 shifts of elementary school in one building. but if there is no other choice for where to send kids, that might be something that would have to happen. And of course, this would possibly have impacts on staffing, on teaching, which we know is something that is of great concern in this community. So again, I don't want to end on a negative note because I wanted to address many of the academic benefits of this plan, but I do think, and not only because many of you asked about it, that it's important to acknowledge the reality that we're in. And there are lots of potential academic and other benefits to this plan that also save us from some of the difficult conversations we would have to have in the future. So with that, I'm going to send it over to Matt and Bob, who are going to talk about buildings a bit more.
And Matt, I am going to jump in and say, in the spirit of meeting our goal for the evening, if you could wrap by 7:20 so we can make sure we have plenty of time for Q&A. And I will give you a polite 2-minute warning.
Thank you. All right. In the interest of being brief, but then also direct, thank you again, everyone, for coming out. Appreciate all of the questions that have been submitted so far and the opportunity to continue to answer them throughout this process. One of the first things that came up and I want to address first is why the athletic recreation fields are included in this plan. That came up each time, and I think as we've been having conversations with community members and stakeholders, the need for athletic and recreation space in town has been an ongoing concern that has been brought up. And we recognize that the space behind the high school represents one of the largest plots in town and is currently being underutilized. Current positioning of the fields leaves a lot of unused space. We also have to limit the use of the main field and turn away some community requests for accessing that so that we can maintain it for our high school sports programs, but then also to ensure that it's able to accommodate our graduation ceremony. This plan provides an opportunity to create a new outdoor physical education, athletic, and community space by upgrading areas that the district just doesn't have the funding on a year-to-year basis to do. School and community soccer teams, field, hockey, lacrosse, and other activities will all be able to utilize this space and help us to reduce some of our current use of the night park. One of the other things that came up, and this was even in the conversation today, was this idea of stadium. And I think stadium might be a little bit of a triggering word for folks. So I want to talk a little bit about what this is and not. Yes, we are adding bleachers. We are raising them up to increase the visibility, because if you're back there the way that they currently sit, it's tough to see even sport programs, but then graduation ceremonies and other things. It's hard to accommodate everything that happens back there. So this would create a raised bleachers with underneath those bleachers adding in bathrooms, which are currently not there, locker room space for students, concessions and ticket stands, and some mechanical devices, all ADA compliant and accessible. Again, these are things that are not currently there. We also, I'm going to have Bob talk a little bit about the last part, or the former part, the last attempt at addressing this and what is in there now, but we trimmed some of that space under there to help get the cost down and make sure that we're adding what's needed, not necessarily what everybody has asked or wanted. The other piece too is, yes, there will be a mix of turf and grass fields. The main field will be multi-use and lined for multi-sports. And there will be other spaces back there, softball fields, but then also grass spaces for practices or other.
Now of grass and or turf here at the proposed athletic complex. And it's my bad for the stadium word. It is a terrible word. This is not Lincoln Financial Field. This is a community space. And neighboring districts have recently improved their community spaces. I think most recently you've probably read about Haddon Township. Haddon Township had a significant investment in a similar program with their track, their field, their lighting, and their new grandstands. I am part of referendums in Cherry Hill East, where we just completed their grandstands. I'm also working in Audubon. That was part of the referendum to restore their 1930 stadium, and I'm also part of some other facilities. The community use aspect is important. In fact, over at Cherry Hill, the municipality now is going to have a fireworks show, very similar, I think, to what Haddonfield does. And Haddonfield had a significant investment in their complex. The schools, as well as this particular area, is a community asset. It belongs to all of you. So when we design spaces, we always think about what is the maximum community use. And I think by putting grass and turf in here, appropriate bathroom facilities so that we don't have to go back into high school in order to use those facilities in a secure setting is beneficial to everybody. The final thought I'll leave you with is academics. The superintendent talked about academic spaces, new opportunities, maybe it's special education, etc. Athletic facilities have new opportunities for our students as well. It prepares them maybe for a college or a higher ed experience as well as a high school experience. So while we enrich our academics with spaces like science labs and new facilities that we'll have in Good Shepherd, I think it's also important to take care of our population that would benefit from an increased athletic facility, whether that be turf, track, or something that would attract their interest as a whole student.
Can you all briefly touch on why the two schools being decommissioned before we transition?
Yeah, I was just about to say we were going to need a couple extra minutes to make sure that we address that, because that was the other biggest question that we got was around why Good Shepherd versus Garfield and Sharp. And first and foremost, I just want to say that it has been a very difficult process. The excitement of adding a space like Good Shepherd does not lessen the pain of what it means to close schools in our community, and that has been felt, I will say personally for myself, as we've gone through this and what it will mean changes. We wanted to talk a little bit about the obstacles and the realities of costs and have Bob give you a little bit of why we are going for this option versus others. And also just briefly to note that this bond referendum will not solve every facility obstacle that we have in town. There is a long list of delayed, ongoing, future projects that we know we have to address. We have regular communications with administration and with the Buildings and Grounds team about what those are, what timelines are, and when they need to be addressed. And those are regular conversations, and get into some of them more. But I want to turn this over to Bob now just to give a little bit more context around costs and realities in those spaces.
So as with anything, we have to look at the acquisition. So Good Shepherd presented itself, and we'll use that as an example and then grade our other facilities against that. So when we look at it objectively, we set forth the criteria. So the first thing is the age, and I'm going to talk about Good Shepherd as it relates to Garfield, as it relates to Sharp. The age of Good Shepherd is 1970. It will be the newest building in Collingswood School District. Garfield is 1905, and Sharp is 1915. When Good Shepherd is acquired and the other facilities are taken offline, Good Shepherd is 42,468 square feet. Interestingly enough, Garfield is 16,479 and Sharp is 27,439. So really Good Shepherd almost replaces square footage by square footage for the two retiring buildings. Then we go in and we look at critical things like Americans with Disability Act and compliance. Vertical circulation is something that comes to mind because those of you that are familiar with Garfield and Sharp know the limitations with getting from one level to another in an accessible manner. This is not the case at Good Shepherd. If you remember the schematic that we showed you last time, a 3-story elevator addition is easily constructed in the back right-hand side of the building. At Garfield, the elevator is not feasible due to existing building layout. It'll be extremely disruptive and costly. We don't have wide corridors in order to put this elevator inside the building. And it's not really possible to have multiple chair lifts to get to different elevations. The same thing is true at Sharp. Elevator really is not going to solve the problem. There's interior stairs with both facilities. So even though we would solve a problem in a certain part of the building, we then couldn't get to an all-purpose room, a nurse's suite, or something maybe on the ground floor. Existing stairs. We know that our students have to safely exit our buildings and our staff safely exit our buildings. So in our Good Shepherd example, we could make those existing stair towers ADA compliant. They're wide enough to meet code with the nosing. We have to change the handrail and the pickets. In Good Intent, or on Garfield and Sharp, that's not the case. These stairs are built, at the turn of the century. They're very, very narrow. They're not able to be widened because of the structure of the building. Toilets. In the Good Shepherd plan, we're renovating 3 toilets. They're neatly stacked over one another. They'll be fully ADA compliant. At Good Shepherd, they're not ADA compliant, and in Garfield, sorry, they're not ADA compliant and only in the basement. None exist except on the 3rd floor over at Sharp. Class size. So we look at classroom space. The class size of Good Shepherd, Good Fortune, is 890 square feet. This is in compliance with the facility efficiency standards in New Jersey for grades 4 and 5. It's 850, so it's actually larger. Conversely, over at Garfield and Sharp, square footages of classrooms range from 739 to 751, and then 652 to slightly larger 816 over at Sharp. Entry doors. Entry doors, we can have ADA compliant entry doors at Good Shepherd. However, at Garfield and Sharp, that'll be very, very challenging. You think about when you enter those buildings, there are interior stairs that get you to different levels. That's really not conducive to having an accessible route of entry. Nurse's suite, right? We need a nurse's suite. The suite needs to be properly sized. It needs to have a handicapped bathroom. That can be achieved in the 1st floor of Good Shepherd. In the basement of Garfield, not so much possible. 1st floor rear area, same thing over at Sharp. It's going to be almost impossible to reconfigure that space. The all-purpose room sizes. Well, the all-purpose room gym at Good Shepherd, 6240. It's 1775 at Garfield and 1,800 square feet over at Sharp. The kitchen area, full-service kitchen will be possible over at Good Shepherd. The kitchen serving area in Garfield is 182 square feet in the basement and 187 square feet off the all-purpose room over at Sharp. The cafeteria will be 3,200 square feet. It'll be a benefit to those students over there. There's none at the other 2 facilities. Libraries, same thing, 950 square feet versus 700 square feet at the other schools, which are basically classrooms. Reconfiguring spaces, you say, okay, you have a small space, why can't you just knock the wall down and go ahead and cut through like you maybe would in an office building? Well, that's easily accomplished in the double-loaded corridor plan that we have at Good Shepherd, the 1970s building. In the 1905 building, we have stone construction over at Garfield, and they're bearing walls, which means we can't just cut holes and expand wherever we want to achieve compliance with classroom size or a bathroom or expanding a nurse's suite. Same problems over at Sharp with CMU construction, bearing walls, very difficult to reconfigure those spaces. Security is always on the mind of our community members, and with the Good Shepherd plan, we're able to have a new mousetrap, a new entrance, a new secured entrance. Over at Garfield and Sharp, very, very challenging. There's only a small vestibule at each of those schools, and access to the main office is challenging. The investment, as you know from the previous cost estimates and analysis, is $25 million. At Good Shepherd, over 42,000 square feet, so we're just about $550 a square foot. With all the challenges at Garfield and Sharp, those costs will be increased, not $25 million, but increased because we can't simply go into those buildings and make some of the interior renovations. And if we think about just putting small additions on the outside, or elevators, or excavating down to get to the lower levels, those costs will be exaggerated with stormwater issues and other concerns that we'll have. So when we looked at the facilities and we graded them out, we graded them to Good Shepherd, Garfield and Sharp rose to the top of the list because of a very objective criteria that I just went down the list with you.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate going through all that information very quickly. Just a quick clarification on the bathrooms. The bathrooms at Sharp are 1st floor and in the basement, not on the 3rd floor. But I want to pass this back over to you, Julia. I know we've taken a lot more of the time than thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I'd like to invite folks to come up as folks are coming up to the mic to ask questions. Just want to remind everyone, please just share your name and again, ask that you reserve personal thoughts or opinions and ask questions, and we're going to get through as many as possible. So for those of you who have questions, please feel free to come up to the mic up front here and make sure it's turned on for you.
Can you hear me? All right. Okay, sorry. So I'm a sharp and now middle school parent. I also have done, I have a master's in development and planning for nonprofits, so I read the funding proposals, and what I just don't understand is how the stadium meets, or the grounds meets any of the goals we talked about. I understand that acquiring Good Shepherd and greater equity, but as far as the figures, I really need it broken down in this way. If the funding, which I read, is for renovations and improvement to underperforming schools, right? That's what it was all founded for. One, I think Sharp would warrant more funding if somebody went after it because of its performance.
Can you make sure you ask your question directly? Thanks.
I would like to know if the money for renovation is 40% of the square footage. What was that? 550?
Total project cost.
But I thought it was per square foot. But the state is only paying 40% so it's what, $57?
Right, because
per square foot.
Good Shepherd is not a current asset of the district.
Right. So if
We get
those
$143 a square foot at 40% because it's not an asset.
So Sharp is, and if we are getting 40% of renovation, right, then that would be $220 per square foot. So can we relook at the amount of money in terms of renovating those schools instead of the minimal amount that we get per square foot for building new?
Thank you. Do you want to answer that?
Sure, you would get 40% of the total project cost of a renovation. So if you did a bathroom in Sharp or you did a bathroom at Newby, you would get 40% of that. The Good Shepherd, again, is not an existing asset, school facility, on the books of the school district. That's why it's only funded at 40% times 143.
Yeah,
So
sorry. He was giving the first context of it, but we can add some more. Appreciate again, everybody at the time. I think we're looking at the space and the renovation costs to get to the place where we can provide the educational experience and meet the gaps that we have recognized and laid out at the beginning of this plan. Piecemeal is not going to do it. And the opportunity of a space that can bring our students together and allow us to create the conditions in our other schools is why we're pushing for this level of investment versus any of our other current properties. If we were to renovate any of our other buildings, we're not going to get the level of space and or assets that would create for those conditions.
So just one additional piece of clarity. I want to go back to, and please, you can walk to the front while I answer this. I want to go back to the original goal that was stated, and the original goal is how do we increase overall educational space? Simply swapping or renovating existing buildings does not get us the additional space. And so without Good Shepherd and without the decommission of specific properties, that does not provide us an opportunity to increase educational space. And so we would be renovating and maintaining a level of status quo at an increased cost.
Hi, my name is Joe DeMarco from Stokes Ave. A lot of the questions I had were answered earlier, but I do have one question. The numbers we're hearing about what's going on with Sharp or Garfield in order to it's the goal, I guess, I think at the first meeting was 12 million for one and 20 million for Sharp, 12 for Garfield, 20 for Sharp, or something like that. Okay. Am I to basically understand that's mainly to make them ADA compliant? That seems like what I just heard. Is that the main goal? In other words, that number is based on trying to make it ADA compliant. Is that correct?
when you touch the buildings for ADA compliance, you're going to get into a host of other issues. You have fire alarm systems, then you're into the electrical system because now you have an elevator. Now you have 20-year-old unit ventilators. So the numbers that I quoted were complete renovation of all the essential building systems, health and safety systems, just like the proposal is for Good Shepherd.
Okay, but that would be predicated on the fact that we're attempting to make it ADA compliant. Is that, in other words, the school is operating now, even if it may not be ADA compliant, it's operating now, the building's safe, it's sound, it's operating, correct? And if we didn't go through with any of this stuff, next year it would still be a compliant school that could run. Is that correct?
It is,
I just
but yes, the rehabilitation code, let me answer your question. So the rehabilitation code puts limits on the amount of renovations that you can do to an existing grandfathered condition before you have to do the things that I'm talking about. So a major addition of an elevator or major renovations of bathrooms could trigger full compliance.
Understood, but I'm just trying to get clear. These things are all triggered because there would be an attempt to make it ADA compliant. But if that wasn't being focused on, if we let the building go as it is now, for example, and then let it go next year, these things wouldn't have triggered it. It's in the attempt to make it ADA compliant, add an elevator, for example. That's when all this 12 million triggers in. There's a lot of people in the community, and of course, people hear things. And a lot of people saying, "Oh my God, what's wrong with Garfield that it needs $12 million worth of renovation?" And I think there's a confusion among some people that they think the building is structurally unsound somewhere. And Sharp also. I focus on Garfield. So anyhow, I just want to make sure of that. And one last
I'm just
question.
going to, ask you to wrap up and
Okay,
ask that
fine,
clarifying
but I have
question.
one last question. The other two buildings that would remain open, I'm leaving Zane North out because that would be, are they ADA compliant? No.
Not fully, no.
Okay, so I'm just curious. So the two buildings that would remain open would have kids in them. If I was
Okay, I'm going to have to, for the sake of time, ask you to. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, Lindsay Oster, Sharp Elementary. I've got loads of questions. I'll try and limit it. First question, I guess, is with regards to the information you just gave us, why Sharp and Garfield, but you compared it 100% to Good Shepherd, and that's going to be for completely, a subset of those students. So what's the comparison to the three buildings that are remaining open? From what we heard at the Board of Ed meeting on March 26th, there were major issues at Newbie. We don't have them at Sharp. The roof is not leaking. There are no major issues. So what, will that stuff be fixed? What are the costs to maintain those three buildings versus maintaining Garfield and or Sharp?
Those buildings were evaluated under similar criteria. Would you like me to go through those with you? Sure. Newbie, age 1923, Tatum 1951. Newbie's 21,953 square feet. Tatum's 27.5. Newbie has an elevator. Tatum, chairlift. No elevator. It could be put in with exterior stairs over at Tatum. The existing stairs at Newbie, ADA handrail modifications need to be made. ADA handrail modifications need to be made at Tatum. Exterior corridor stairs is a question mark. Toilets, Newbie, ADA first floor. Tatum, ADA first floor. Class sizes, Newbie, 734 to 1,051, and Tatum is 802 to 931. Entry doors, some are ADA compliant at Newbie, same thing at Tatum, and stairs is an issue. Nurses suite, first floor is not square footage compliant, it has no ADA toilet, that's consistent for both schools. APR, the APR is 1813 plus 306 square foot stage over at Newbie, and at Tatum it's 2,100 square feet. The kitchen is a separate warm-up area in Newbie, and it's inside the warm-up area at Tatum. Cafeterias are non-libraries are 754 and 800. Reconfiguring, you have CMU bearing walls at Newbie and the same at Tatum. Security vestibules could be done. Tatum has a small vestibule, and the costs would be less for these two schools.
Bob, can
don't
you
have the social.
clarify for everyone why the other schools are staying online, and it was specifically Sharp and
I
Garfield?
just went
chosen?
through the features.
Just like
list.
the
Bob,
headline.
Would you say, just I'm kind of reading between the lines for you here, would you say that, I feel like we've been told in the meetings, part of the reasons why you recommended Tatum, Newbie, and Zane be kept online is because because of when they were built and how they were built. They will be, because as we've said before, none of us here are claiming that all of our facilities that remain are in tip-top shape. That would be an insane claim. Nobody thinks that. But the 3 elementary schools that are remaining online would be more cost effective and are set up to be renovated, added onto, an elevator put into in an easier way than the way you described for Sharp and Garfield. Is that accurate?
Yes, and they have larger spaces, as I pointed out, that
Okay.
exist.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. 2 other quick questions.
I want to make sure we get through everyone. I'm really
Can I
sorry.
ask one really quick question?
If it's a clarifying question to what's been asked already.
Sure, it is a clarifying question. So the number of seat increase in the proposal, it said that we're already at a 200 seat deficit in the current seats in you know what I'm trying to say. In the proposal, as it was laid out, there were literally 80 seats added. We're already over by 120, so now we're at a deficit of 120. We're at a deficit of 120 per the proposal that was put out there. So I guess how are you saying that there's an increase if it's only being increased right now by 80 seats?
So I think that we're conflating two issues. And so when we talk about the addition of the Good Shepherd has a capacity of about 300 students. We are also included within this proposal adding 6 additional classrooms at the Zane North campus, which is already set up for ADA compliance, which adds additional seats for young people.
Okay, what's in the proposal is what's submitted to the state. Whether there is more space in Good Shepherd, but we're not adding classrooms in the state. So what's being submitted to the state, and Bob can correct me if I'm wrong, is the seats that are needed, not the exact all of the seats that's in Good Shepherd.
So the Good Shepherd is going to add 300 seats. The additions over at Zane North are adding another 126 seats. That's a total of 426 seats.
I'm going to welcome the next question.
Hi, Rachel Hennessy, newbie parent. I have a question regarding the disparity of the improvements that are not being done on the schools that are remaining open. As much as I want to focus on the future and appreciate that we are investing in our future, my kids get rained on when they're in school, and that's like an issue now. So kind of to go off of what Matt said, is there a list of projects that are already funded, or are these lists of things that need to get done and are not funded?
So there are a list of projects within all of our buildings. And then you list out within their order of what their need is. So we are aware of the issues over at Newbie. We know that there are leaks and a new roof is going to have to be put on within the next 5 years. We're aware of the process. We also know about the bathroom. So the bathroom was also part of adding in a teacher bathroom space when we talked about the Garfield sale, one of the areas. So there's a couple obstacles when you start to look at that. The best way to add in a bathroom into Newbie, where it doesn't cut into classroom space, I believe we were saying was like something like 6 figures. Whereas if you put one down into the basement and add an extra one in the basement, but then you're cutting into potential space like in the art room, that is something like 50,000, more around that area.
Right. So
Yeah.
There are other facility needs that are in the district's long-range facility plan, and with your input, they could be considered for the proposal or not. The Board of Education
To do the things that we're proposing right now. With the sale of Garfield will come funds that we would want to go towards things like the issues at Newbie, things like a recreation center at Sharp, things like other upgrades that are needed in other facilities. And then on top of that, in 5 Beth Ann years, 6, the middle school, high school referendum from 2005 rolls off the books. And so tax neutral to everyone else, quite a large upgrade can be given to the other facilities that need to be
So this
upgraded.
is like long range.
It has to be
They're
long
gonna
range.
Get, right. But
Not
why-
necessarily the newbie rain
So
issue.
why is there
but-
any room for changing on the referendum, or is it all or nothing? Because right now, Good Shepherd, I think that's a great idea. I think this is it could benefit our community. However, like, you're doing this massive add-on to Zane, and then, like, we're just doing an ADA playground at the 2 other elementary schools. Like, isn't there any room for some of that money to go towards starting improving some of the schools, so it's not just one school or 2 schools benefiting from everyone, it's our entire community.
That's what we're trying to say. The money from the sale of Garfield,
Right,
excuse
so
me,
these
would
are all
go towards.
hypotheticals, though. So
Well,
you want
no,
us-
Garfield has to be sold
No,
in
I
order for this
understand
plan
that.
to work.
But
So
you
that's
want
not a
us to say
hypothetical.
yes to a referendum. You want us to say yes to a referendum and then hope that you guys are going to do that afterwards. And I'm sorry, but like
I mean,
want
I'm
there's
going
gonna
to
plan.
stop you because I know there's lots of people waiting. At the end of the day, that part is, yeah, that's down to trust to a certain extent. A lot of the vote for anything that we vote on
So,
is up to trust.
Just to confirm, there's no changes to the referendum. The referendum is as it is, and there's not going to be changes right now. There's no like hearing your community and adjusting it, or is it just staying exactly how it is?
So we're listening to the community. We will make changes that might be feasible. We can't change it to make upgrades to every building. That's true. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How you doing? My name is Stuart Campbell. I'm a Sharp alumni and a former contractor and subcontractor. I've worked a lot with engineers on residential and commercial projects, and I'm trying to find out, because I can't find them, how do we get access to the bidding proposals, the figures that you came up with, that this will be this much money to do this, the engineer's report showing what the problem would be with upgrading them, any kind of cost analysis that shows this amount is definitely going to cost this much. How do we see how many people put bids in? How do we know? I mean, like they said, you're spitting out this stuff like we're dumb, and I'm not dumb. I do construction, and like
I'm gonna ask in the spirit of our community agreements, like
Okay,
to not
I
levy
understand
personal
that, but
opinions.
Can I-
So let's make
Yeah.
sure we get the direct.
Can
how
I,
do we get the documentation and figures of
sure.
what this is?
And apology, I want to recognize and just name that this is a tough space for all of us. We all live here. We're all feeling this. Our intent is not to speak down or speak at anybody. We're nervous up here just like all of you are to come up here and speak. We put a lot of work and a lot of time into this plan, and we want to make sure that we're answering your questions. And we'll try to do that. One of the things that I think might be a misunderstanding at this point right now is that these are estimates that our architect put together. We're not at a bid stage yet.
How do you know if you haven't put any kind of estimate together? How do you know the cost?
Sure. I'll let him.
Sure. So
answer.
on the website, and again, my apologies if I seem disrespectful to you. On the website, there are multiple pages of improvement costs for Good Shepherd. Those costs were not done for each of the other elementary schools. They are based on my work in this district for 20 years and square foot analysis for those other buildings. So you're not going to find, let me finish, you're not going to find a fire alarm at $6 a square foot times 19,000 square feet for the other buildings. It's a square footage. Take what we're spending, proposal is for Good Shepherd in our experience, and apply that to the square footages for the other buildings to come up with millions of dollars of improvements that would be required.
Right, but there has to be some kind of documentation showing like this is the better and more economically responsible thing versus this. And how do you come to the figure that this renovation will actually cost that much?
So the projects, again, they're estimated at this point. Once the referendum passes, the district will have the funds to commission architect and engineering drawings, detailed drawings. Then we're going to go out for public bid and get bid proposals in a public forum for what it actually costs. So right now we're in the schematic design phase because the Board of Education doesn't have endless funds to design each of the improvements at all of the buildings.
And those resources are on the website? Okay, thank you.
Hi, Kara Boiler, newbie parent. Hello, everybody. Thanks for all your hard work. I'm going to ask my question directly to you. I think you kind of answered it. So I wanted to know, in the area of playground improvements, is there still room for negotiation on how those are being done?
Remington and Vernick engineers, the district engineer, did conceptual designs for each of the playgrounds. Those conceptual designs are generally to give you an idea of what could be accomplished. The Department of Education allows for final designs to be submitted, again, after the referendum passes, after the engineering's done, and after we consult the principal and the other stakeholders in that school for age-appropriate equipment, areas, fencing, et cetera, et cetera. Long-winded answer, yes, those proposals will be modified to a more specific level after the referendum passes.
And they would include community input. I just want to add that part. Is that true?
It's working within, working with the local school PTAs and communities around there about specific.
Kara, do you have a?
I'm good.
Thank you.
I would say, sorry to cut you off. I would also clarify when we talk about the design choices, not just the playground, so that everybody understands that there are other design choices that are still going to go out to the community about.
No doubt, because if we saw something on Good Shepherd, there's quite a lot of design elements there that may be able to be shifted. Those would be the purple areas that you see in the PowerPoint, corridors, et cetera, et cetera.
Thanks, go ahead. Laura Toth, I am a Tatum parent. My question is more directed towards the board. Given the high level of community concern, especially for closures of the school, someone already asked if there's room for change in a referendum. How much room is there? Like, maybe we could take a beat and say, like, okay, we didn't expect there to be this much pushback about closing the schools. Maybe we don't add an addition onto Zane, and if we stop renting space from the church for the preschool and stop sending preschool kids to Oakland, maybe we could still get the Good Shepherd School and keep our classroom sizes within the correct amount of numbers. I see you shaking your heads, which you could have done the math, but I think that for community members, we could appreciate seeing that math, because it is really hard to close schools and have this like very strong referendum all at once without being able to, as a community, it feels like we didn't get a say in the referendum. So maybe if we had more time to digest and discuss, and maybe if there were polls on this, then maybe like a revised referendum would have a better chance of passing, because it's concerning to me that we might miss the chance to purchase Good Shepherd.
So I would agree with that. That's very concerning, I think, for all of us. And if we take too much of a beat, we're going to lose that opportunity, just like what happened in Haddonfield. And so to answer your question about, I think Matt has done a great job of recognizing this throughout this process as well. We understand closing schools is an emotional thing. It's a big deal. It's a big change. Nobody is saying that that is not the case, which is why we wanted to make sure that, to let folks know that when we are, not 60 days before the vote, potentially in September, right? We're trying to give everyone the opportunity to process this entire plan, think it through, and then decide whether you think it's something you want to support or not. To clarify some of the suggestions that you made, those we have tried to think of as all of the different ways, and at the end of the day, like, I know everyone wants all of the evidence of all of the data. Part of it has to be on trust that none of us sitting up here are trying to close these schools out of spite or anger or because we are being lazy about whether this was the right way to do it. We tried to figure out, how can we save all schools? That was not how we started this plan out. Bob made it very clear, in order for us to gain Good Shepherd, which is our ultimate goal here, because we feel like without that, we've missed our chance at a newer building, we have to show a certain number of seats we are in need, of a certain number of seats. We cannot use pre-K seats for that, because that's a separate grant and that's a separate number altogether. So anything having to do with the pre-K comes from separate grant funding. It doesn't come out of our annual budget, and those numbers don't count in terms of showing number of seats that we are in need of. The way that we show that we are in need of a certain number of seats has to be decommissioning some school buildings. And the recommendation, after going through all of the school buildings, about which ones to decommission in order to give our students a newer, more upgraded space. So not necessarily to add 800 or even 200 new seats, because right now the DOE would say you don't need 200 new seats. You don't have the population to warrant that. That's not approved. So we can't show we're buying. We would have loved to have just bought Good Shepherd, right? Great, we have Good Shepherd. We're not allowed. They will say no. It won't be approved. So what we're trying to do is figure out a way to get the newest school building in our district on our books. And the only way that we can do that is by taking away seats from other school buildings. That's just our only choice. And the recommendation of the two buildings to do that to were the two buildings that renovating them later on down the line, for whoever was asking the question, which is a great one, about what are we going to do about the buildings that need extra updates as well, is to, he said, don't use the buildings that can be added onto or can be renovated in a more cost-effective manner. So that is why we are keeping Tatum. That is why Zane, while it has the reputation that it has, it also, for better or for worse, was built at a time where adding onto it is super easy and super cost-effective. That's the reason we're adding on to Zane. Not because it gets the best scores, not because it's the most desirable neighborhood. It's not any of those things. I promise you it's not that. It is the space and the makeup of the building, architecturally only. And that's just the only choice that we had. So we couldn't come to you and say, which buildings do you want us to keep and which don't you? Because first of all, I think that would just have ended up in a crazy argument in and of itself, but also because it is our job as the board and the district to make the most financially responsible decision. And if we keep Sharp and Garfield because sentimentally we just want to keep our 5 elementary schools, we're not actually servicing our students the best way that we can. I mean, that's kind of my answer. So I completely understand that we wish that all of these buildings could stay, that we love the character of them, that we love the community that has been formed. I also believe that our community can come together and create new amazing school communities at K through 3 schools and at a 4 through 5 building. I just believe that this community can do that kind of thing.
Sorry, kind of like a clarifying question. I'm actually like really curious about the numbers. Since we're building onto Zane, how many classrooms or like seats does that add?
Then we're also the Collingswood community. And in order to have Good Shepherd, which is I think has been repeated, there is no way to have Good Shepherd without decommissioning 2 schools. That's the state. That is not the board. That is not Garrison Architects. There is no way to have Good Shepherd without decommissioning 2 schools.
Thank you. I'm going to make sure we keep going.
Good evening, Jen Rossi. For something completely different, the stadium project, please. So Camden County just paid $20 million to have Newton Creek dredged. Do we have specified ways that we are going to protect the district from potential liability and fines during the 10 acres approximate behind the school when we are renovating back there to keep from adding into a problem we just fixed, including the potentiality with the turf, also having some runoff, including the chemicals with cleaning and things like that, please?
The Board of Education's engineering firm that prepared the schematics is Remington and Vernick. Fortunately, they're the Camden County engineer as well as the borough's engineer. So we will take those questions down and we will get Dennis McNulty to answer them for you.
Because we know that Paul VI is not doing their part to keep runoff and Penn Township isn't doing great either with their runoff. So just wants to make sure that we are addressing that because I know ecologically that is a huge concern for Collingswood. And just to make sure something that doesn't cost as part of the referendum, making sure that we are reaching the needs of those community members with diversity, equity, and inclusion to make sure that we are focusing our hiring efforts towards having more
Sorry
Thanks.
for the comment. I just want to recognize it is 8 o'clock. We're going to finish all of the questions that are in line for the evening, and also want to let folks know there is another opportunity to engage in questions April 16th, same time, same place.
I am Tara Moot. I am the resource teacher of special ed at Newby School, and I have taught 19 years here. So my question is, you were saying about the inclusion. We haven't seen much in the plan for special education, and every building should have special education. I completely 100% agree with that. Is the biggest problem that some of myself and my other staff members in this plan, we talk about the money and the funding, and inclusion is important, but in order for it to work properly, you're going to have to give us money to hire more staff for true inclusion to occur. Because right now we have on the elementary level we have 5 total resource teachers and only 6 self-contained teachers.
Just want to make sure we clarify your question. Is it about resource? It is about cost coverage for additional special
Cost
education.
coverage for additional, if they want to do true inclusion and they're sitting there saying that we're doing the worst here in Collingswood with inclusion at 41%. Well, it comes down to the almighty dollar.
So first, I just want to say, when the numbers about inclusion were given, I hope that we were very clear, but just let's be clear again. No one up here was saying it is because the teachers are doing a terrible job or was a choice that was being
I'm not
made.
taking like
just
that.
just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right, and I'm glad you asked the question because the road to inclusion isn't cheap and it's not fast. So it's important to note that the goal is to ultimately have full inclusion. That will not happen overnight, as you know, and no one is claiming that it will. It's the goal of where we hope to be. What we can guarantee right away is that there would be enough staff to not have a self-contained classroom in every school, as opposed to having them have to leave their home school or be separated from a sibling in order to go there.
And you're putting out all this money for, you're decommissioning 2 schools, and then
right, but that doesn't come from our regular budget. That comes from something from this referendum, and nobody's disagreeing with you. And I don't know if you want to talk specifically about the budget, but we're also talking September 2027, and you're right, that has to be part of what we build into it. So you're not wrong.
I'm just putting it out there.
Okay.
Let me provide just really a 30-second just clarification. And so to Tara's point, inclusion is a multi-year, multi-phase endeavor. And so we are currently moving in that direction through many pilots, both at the elementary and at the secondary level. And so the next step would be, and all of these are contingent upon an affirmative response in September, we would be partnering with the New Jersey Center for Inclusive Education with a multiple year plan, knowing that what we would be planning for with an effective start date as it relates to September of 2027, and then in subsequent years continuing to build. And so when we talk about daily operations and we talk about annual budget, we would have to build internal capacity as we begin shifting to a more inclusive model. And so yes, an inclusion model is a more costly model, but academically speaking, it's a better model for all students that are involved. And we believe it will be worth the investment.
Can I also jump in here just to clarify, right? The kind of the 2 pieces of inclusion are that we have to have the physical space to be able to actually have inclusive classrooms. And we also have to have the resources and teachers to do it, right? So the thing is, if we don't have both, that's the problem, right? So this referendum, because it's about facilities, about the physical space in order to have inclusive classrooms. Yes, the budgetary personnel issue is also the other piece, but we're talking about bond referendum, which is about facilities.
Go ahead. Hi, my name is Peggy Jubb. I am a Collingswood resident on top of being the self-contained teacher for K-2 at Mark Newby. My question is actually about the placement of self-contained. Nothing that I have looked over says really anything about special ed. I am very for inclusion practices, but sometimes the least restrictive environment for students is a self-contained classroom. And are those still going to be a thing? Because our classes right now are from
K to 2 and then 3 to 5. So what's going to happen with that third grade class? Because inclusive practices, they really should be with the fourth and fifth graders age because of their age gap. But if we move them to like a K to 3 classroom, they need to be in with the younger kids to be inclusive. So there could only be a 4-year age gap between the youngest and oldest students. So what's going to happen with that third grade?
So the first thing what's going to happen is that we will be engaging our special educators as well as our child study team. Those are conversations. And so one of the things that we would have the benefit of is we would have several years to plan effectively to go through all of those core pieces. And so we don't have, at the onset we talked about hypotheticals. And so right now we're talking about hypotheticals without an approval to be able to move forward, without a budget, without resources, and without a start date. And so once we have the resources, a start date, then we can talk with a level of finality. But that conversation around moving to inclusion at its heart of hearts cannot and will not be done without teachers being at the table helping us design the model.
Hi, I'm Danielle Patterson. I'm a Collingswood resident and a teacher at Martin School. So the recurring theme and the overreaching goal of the referendum seems to be to increase access to STEAM space in Collingswood. And speaking off of Mark Newby, adding the much needed and very welcome ADA playground. Once you take out 4th and 5th grade and you take out 4th and 5th for self-contained, we are not going to have enough space in our building to accommodate 2 Ks, 2 1s, 2 2s, and 2 3s, right? You are also not adding more physical space to the building. So Ms. Sherman spoke at the last meeting about kids learning in the hall. Kids are still going to be learning in the hall. You are not adding any.
Can you make sure you're asking a question? I want to make sure it gets answered and we're able to.
Sure. I'm sorry. As per the presentation, are you considering how you're going to combat that problem of not adding more physical space since that is the overreaching goal?
Yes. And one of the, as folks have been asking, what are some things that, and Ms. Jebb actually made me think of this as well, what are some things that might be changed based on community input as well as enrollment? One of them is we have been talking about Good Shepherd being made into a 4 to 5 building. However, there is more space in that school than just for 4th and 5th grade. So for instance, if the teachers in the district at elementary school come together and are like, you know what, 3rd through 5th grade is developmentally better. What Ms. Jebb just said about the special education classes would be better. That is a possibility because there are other spaces that we could move the district offices to, Sharp for instance. If we think as a community that the better use of space is for 3rd grade students to be in that building. So yes, we are aware that because we can only do so much in this particular referendum that we want to be able to make sure that newbie has 2 classes per grade like everybody else, and that things may need to look slightly differently because of that. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, but just, I heard a buzzword of community input. So you are considering community input and thinking of revising part of this referendum.
Well, yes, we never said that we're not taking community input. We just made it clear that there are certain parts of it that, for instance, if the entire community said, we will not vote for this if Sharp and Garfield are decommissioned, then I guess the referendum isn't happening. Because we can't, that part can't change. Some of the playgrounds, the specific use of space for Good Shepherd building, those things, that's what we're listening to right now.
Maggie Jamiewski. I am a Tatum parent. I have 2 really easy questions, and I'm taking a ton of notes, but I'm not seeing where this is presented. What is the additional square footage we're gaining from getting rid of 2 schools and gaining? I know you said square footage of each building, but help me real quick with the math. How much additional square footage are we gaining by decommissioning 2 schools?
Sure. So you're acquiring 42,468 square feet at Good Shepherd, and you're retiring 16,427.4. So So quick math is
Well, 16 is
27.
just the one school.
And you have to add in the Zane proposal as well. That
Okay.
adds more square footage.
Okay, so because I had from last note,
So
we
you
had
have
16,000 square footage in Garfield.
Right,
we're
so you
losing
have
22.
16,000 square feet, bear with me,
Mm-hmm.
16,000 square feet at Zane. You have 42,000 square feet at Good Shepherd. That's 58,000 square feet. And you're retiring 16.4 and 27.4. So you're picking up 16,000 square feet?
Okay. And then one other clarification that was kind of touched on, but after, and just, is it 126 new seats we're adding by this whole
At Zane
school?
North.
Yes, but
And
what about?
300 new seats.
Well, not new
at Good
seats, because
Shepherd.
we're decommissioning 2 schools. So,
But when you decommission 2 schools,
yeah.
they become what's called unhoused students, which is
Okay.
what the board president was talking about.
Okay.
We need those in order to get the state funding.
Okay, so how many unhoused students if we decommission 2 schools? 2 schools together.
346.
346.
Right,
and
it's
we're
on
gaining
page 4 of the
300.
PowerPoint. I'm sorry?
And we're gaining 300 from Good Shepherd.
Plus 126 for Zane.
Okay, so we're
426. So we're gaining
we're
more
not-
seats.
It's not 426 seats.
I'm sorry.
If
Why
you
not?
subtract what we're decommissioning.
I think we already made
Okay.
it clear,
I
folks,
just want the
that,
total number. Is
that
it
we're
126
not, the
or is it
point of this
120?
program
let's
is
let
not
folks
to
answer.
gain a lot more seats because we're not allowed to do that. We're not gaining a bunch more seats. We're improving the seats that we already have.
Okay, thank you.
Net gain is 80 seats. Just want to make sure everybody heard that. Net gain is 80 seats.
All right, we're going to keep moving. Julie, go ahead.
I have 2 questions, but I have to pick one.
We'd ask for respect. I know this is, again, a contentious time, but let's give each other the respect of making sure we can hear the person asking the question as well as folks giving answers.
Okay. I'm going to go with the emotional one. Because, but what I guess what I want to say is that proposing closing schools is more than just emotional. It's more than emotional because there are unintentional impacts, and I haven't heard as much as I'd like to about that. So one of the things, I was on the equity committee, and I was on a group that was invested in working on equity within the neighborhood schools. And one of the things we talked about is the idea of increased absences and latenesses when you are going to farther distance. For example, and this seems to be the fact that the only school on the west side of Collingswood is being closed. I appreciate that it was said that this was not based on DEI because that was apparent to me. And I would like to hear what if we did try to make a plan based on DEI, what would that look like? And if we tried to make a plan that really took DEI into consideration, would we close the only school on the west side? And that's what I would really like for you to have into consideration. Obviously, people have emotional tradition. There's a lot of reasons that we could discard because they're emotional, but there are also very practical reasons that I think are also being discarded. So it is a real question, and the question is, if you were putting DEI at the forefront, would you be able to, in good faith, close the only school on the west side? And this is where I also think the numbers are very important to those of us. We heard very specific comparisons between Good Shepherd and Sharp and Garfield, but we did not hear very specific comparisons between the schools that are not being decommissioned. And I think those numbers are very relevant to see how big those differences are. And I think the west side would really like to know that, to have some. I absolutely think everyone here is working in good faith. I think everyone has their heart in the right place, every single person in this room. But I would like more reflection on that piece.
So I'm going to just clarify to start, kind of if DEI were being the deciding factor, would the board be making the same decision? Is
Yes.
that a fair?
And even if this does happen, this is a perfect follow-up question. What other DEI things are being put into place besides just more different kinds of kids being together a little more? What are some of the other DEI initiatives? I would love to hear more about that. Thank you.
I'll start with, I don't think we would answer a hypothetical on if this was the cause that we would do it. I don't think that would be fair to anyone involved because there wasn't research done primarily on doing something just for one reason. I would say, I'm sorry, what was the second?
What other DEI initiatives are being considered besides just greater
She had also
differentiation?
asked about the numbers list, and I think where it's getting confused is that what the architect went through was what these buildings have and what these other buildings don't, and that's why they're chosen. He's not giving an estimate on saying it costs this much to bring Sharp up to where Newbie is. He went through the size of rooms, the repairs that were needed, whether it was ADA or not, and said, this is the difference and this is why it's chosen. Now, Bob can, obviously, I'm sorry, you can speak for yourself.
That's why we established the 12 different points of grading that I went through.
Yeah. Sorry, I jumped up here. I'm Roger Chu. I'm on the board, so I'm not some random guy just running up here. Sorry about that.
I would have moderated you out of the space.
So the question about the DI piece, I want to refocus a few things. One is that at the core, right, this referendum is about addressing the fact that we have really old buildings that also have small spaces that we have to deal with. Right? These are really old buildings that we have to find a solution for. Now, then after we've looked at, hey, we have a plan to address those buildings, how do we address DEI here, right, within this plan? I want to kind of point back to what Bruce said earlier, which is the quote from the American Federation of Teachers talking about how integration is one of the most important pieces to DEI, right? When we look at our elementary schools, right, we have a school that's, I think, 80, 90% white, and we have a school that's 60% non-white. There are very real differences in the racial and ethnic makeup of our elementary schools. So when we talk about DEI, right, one of the things I think about is my experience growing up in Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis city schools, primarily black and brown, whereas you look at the suburbs around, primarily white. In an effort to get resources spread more evenly within Shelby County, the Memphis City school system dissolved to try to force the Shelby County school system to help with resources. Not even with integration, because they say, well, you're in your own neighborhood, you're in Whitehaven in Memphis, you're not in Germantown in Shelby County, so why would we combine those schools at all? You're 30 miles apart. Right? Here in Collingswood, we have elementary schools that have different racial and ethnic percentages that are a mile apart, where we can truly integrate our schools. And so, at least for me, my question has always been personally, is integration worth our coming together to figure out a mile difference? Or is a mile too much for us as a community to figure out for integration? That's my question, at least when I think about DEI.
Well, we're gonna keep moving. I appreciate that this is an intense issue, and would ask for folks to kind of lean into making sure we're giving folks who. I'm gonna move on. We're keeping course and we're following. Thanks.
My name is Christy Wolf, and I have a kindergartner at Garfield and a younger son who seems like with this timeline would be in the first kindergarten class to go to a different one of the 2 remaining schools. And I guess my first question is, is there a potential buyer for Garfield right now, or like some ideas of what that huge space in our little section of town might become?
There is, we would never put Garfield or something potential on the market without the referendum passing. So there's really no conversation that can take with that unless we know we have somewhere to put kids. And zoning requirements with the borough and the planning and zoning board will lean more into what could be in that space, and that would have nothing to do with anyone involved in this section.
Hi, my name is Kate Kasarowicz. You say that we wouldn't be able to have the same level of assets at Sharp or Garfield as we could at Good Shepherd, and that may be true. Closing Sharp may be more cost effective. However, ultimately say that you want to best serve the community. Sharp currently has the second highest student population, which also means the second highest number of seats. In addition, it's the only school serving an entire section of the town. Isn't an entire side of town worth the investment and the seats? Because what you're saying your goal is and what you're proposing in this referendum are two completely different things. Why not choose to close a smaller school and actually invest in Sharp in order to best serve the entire community and have integration there? Just throwing this out there as an example.
I just want to make sure we're getting to your question. Can you make sure it's in the form of a question?
Sure, yeah. Why not choose to invest or close a smaller school and actually invest in Sharp and integrate there?
I just like to make a quick point about that is right now there are more kids crossing Route 30 to get to Sharp than who are on the other side of Route 30. And some thoughts that go through it is everybody's trying to figure out what's the best decision. Is that if, for example, if we were to close Newbie and we had to do this rearranging, then the number would double, close to double to who would have to travel to Sharp. So we're trying to not just think about Sharp kids. It's a decision that everyone's trying to think about all kids. And I get the town and the community pride in it, but it's the responsibility of anybody who decides to take on this work to not separate communities or schools or kids. It's about all of our kids, whether they're Newbie, Tatum, Zane, Sharp.
Okay, so just say a town has 3 fire stations, 2 on one side, 1 on the other. No, just to clarify. If you have to close one, are you going to close the one on the far side of town and keep 2 close together? Is that best serving the community?
Can you please ask a clarifying question,
How
not
is
a
that
hypothetical?
serving the community?
Because we're not talking about fire stations, we're talking about schools.
We're talking about a community and access to resources.
To clarify that, there's the idea is as if we're saying, hey, we have 5 elementary schools and we have chosen 2 to close. That's not what has happened. We have 5 elementary schools, right? There's been an assessment about the state of those elementary schools and what would be the most cost-effective and feasible way for us to prepare for the future. Though the Sharp and Garfield were the 2 schools that were identified as, practically speaking, the most practical in terms of closing because of the condition, what our architect Bob Garrison went through, and the cost of renovating or supporting them into the future. Right? So it's not just a capricious choice of which schools.
How can you say you're worried about the future when you're not taking care of the schools that you currently have? You're asking for tens of millions of dollars, 85%.
Okay. I'm sorry, you've had an opportunity to ask the questions. I also want to clarify that our next person is the last question. I made an announcement letting folks know that we would be wrapping up after that, given that it is 8:24. I'm going to hold us to that tonight. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Liz Young. I'm a Tatum parent. I have a quick clarifying question before my real question, just because we keep throwing around this term seats, and I'm just curious what that actually means. Is it purely just square footage in a classroom, or does it account for all of the space we need outside of a classroom for resource teachers and things like that?
The state of New Jersey tells us the definition of seats, so it's square footage based.
Okay. So my real question is, I know it was stated earlier that we can't possibly project what our budget needs are in the future because we don't know what our student body is going to be in 3 years, which I can understand. But at the same time, we can project if we were to assume it was based on our current student capacity right now. And we're talking about adding all of these great facilities and adding a library in and having a fully staffed kitchen and things like that. But we are currently in a budget crisis in our school district. So what does 2027 look like? And can we actually support all of these new great things that we're adding to our district?
So Liz, that's a great question. And so I'm going to try to be as definitive and direct as I can be. And so when we're talking about construction, construction is the system or the structures that we need in order for students to be able to fill in. One of the things that we've talked about, and we have been pretty clear in asking the community for their assistance, is the current state of the fiscal environment for public education in New Jersey current year. The funding formula that expires as of June this particular year is fundamentally flawed. In Collingswood and Oak Lynn, there is a structural deficit based on the current funding formula. What that structural deficit means is that there is a significant gap between the funds that are available in terms of local fair share, what we as a school district have the ability to ask, and actual need of students. The annual cost continues to increase, and so there is a hole that we're not able to currently fill with the current funding formula that expires. Therefore, in terms of for future funding, we are asking an all-hands-on-deck approach to advocate with Trenton for the flexibility and the opportunity for local school communities to decide their own fiscal fate and to fund their educational programs. And so the reason why we're asking for folks now is because they're in the process of discussing and designing a new funding formula for future years, and we need to have public voice and strength of advocacy involved in those conversations so that by 2027 we're not looking at fiscal challenges in terms of daily operational expenses.
So to clarify, we are banking on that problem being fixed?
I mean, we're not gaining any more students with this plan, so the funding for the buildings is the same funding that we would have now in a lot of ways, right? Like the money travels with the students. Right. So we would be moving students from other buildings.
And we are not adding any more staff that we would need to hire.
I mean, that's a decision that we cannot answer. That's a question we can't answer until 2027. We would not be planning to reduce any of the staff that we already have, and so those, just like the students, would travel to the different buildings based on needs. So would the teachers. Okay.
So where right now we have one art teacher that services all of the elementary schools, we can't necessarily plan on having a new art teacher to utilize new art space that's being touted in Good Shepherd.
Well, no, because they would still be servicing K to 5.
Okay.
In the district, yes. Okay. So we can't make those kinds of promises. That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you all again for spending a copious amount of your evening with us. As you are getting it up and departing, I want to remind folks that there is another Q&A session, April 16th, 6:30, again here. And if anyone is interested in listening to today's session, it was recorded. It will be posted. And thank you again.